Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Dotsie. Hi, Dotsie.
Hi.
So I was thinking about something, and I wanted to talk about it with you. Ooh. And there was this test done in the 70s called the marshmallow test. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's about whether self-restraint and being able to delay gratification is can make you more successful in life. So basically what happened, it was done at Stanford University with kids. I think they were about 7. You've heard of it.
Yes, I just didn't realize it was called the marshmallow test. Yes,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe it's not. It's what I call it. And it's a famous test because these researchers gave kids, they said, you have a choice. We can give you a marshmallow now, and if you can wait before eating it for 15 minutes, we'll give you a second marshmallow and you can eat them both afterwards. But if you want to eat the marshmallow now, you can, but you'll just get one marshmallow. So basically it was a test to see how much self-restraint the kids had and if they were able to delay gratification. And then they looked at these children years later to see how successful they were in their life and decided that the kids who were able to delay gratification, I think they only looked into their teens, but the kids that were able to delay gratification were more successful and happier in their lives. The ones who were able to not eat the marshmallow right away. And actually, if you look at the videos, it's pretty hilarious, the things that some of these kids do to try and not eat the marshmallow that's sitting right in front of them. They're left alone in a room with a camera on them, and some of them are singing, some of them are pacing the room, trying, some of them are hiding from the marshmallow because it's
like
so tempting.
skills that they're developed, right? To not do the thing and to practice the self-restraint.
It's really cute. You can look it up, and I know there's these black and white videos of these 7-year-olds. But if you do look it up, you'll also see that these tests have been a little bit discredited because all the tests were done without looking at life circumstances, which we're much more aware of nowadays. But the basic tenet is about delaying gratification for a greater good. And this has come up for me a lot in my life because I feel like if I don't control, Dotsie, if I don't control myself or if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, then my life is going to fall apart. And what it's led to is for me to be a person with a lot of discipline and a lot of routine and not a lot of ability to be really in the moment and go with the flow and listen to what I want in that moment. Because, and the reason I thought about it was because my friend Jason was staying with us this weekend. And on Sunday, I was standing in the kitchen and I was saying, oh God, I got to go swimming. It's so cold. And I don't know, I just don't want to go. And so Jason says, well, why don't you not go? And I said, I'm not going to, I have to go. It's a workout. He goes, why don't you just go for a walk? I'm like, that's not a workout. Not for me. And
oh God.
So I just wondered, and I just want to say that I did go for the swim and I ended up thinking to myself, I'm really glad that I went, even though I didn't want to go, because now I feel great. And I've never regretted doing a workout, and a lot of them I don't want to start. but I never regret them afterwards.
No one's
So
ever said, I really wish I didn't work out this morning.
right. But how many of us have said, I wish I had worked out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it just brings to mind that, Jason has some good points. Like maybe I should have listened to my body and just gone for a walk. Like, okay. But on the other hand, I really did feel good after the swim. And this kind of driving inside me gives me some pressure, but also in the end, I'm always glad. And Dotsie, I want to talk to you because you have a little more balance in your life than I do, I think. You certainly pushed yourself during the training for the Olympics and your pro cycling career where you, even if you didn't feel like working out, you did. But I'm just wondering how you look at it now in life, because maybe our listeners have this battle on a daily basis too about, following what they want now.
I think that I mean, you did a brilliant job at seeking delayed gratification, right? Because you were going to get gratified like after the swim, maybe a bit during, but definitely after the swim. And so you took that and it wasn't happening in your kitchen, that gratification at all, right? And you said, this is going to feel really great later. And you knew that because of the repetition of doing it. What's really been coming up for me lately, because I'm just hearing it so much from this upcoming generation, is how this word uncomfortable. I'm hearing so often that makes me feel uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. When they do that, I'm uncomfortable. When you said that, I felt so uncomfortable. And my first question when I hear that is, why are you seeking comfort all the time? Yeah. Like, where is the growth, right? In constantly remaining in a state of complete and utter comfort. And it kind of leans into the delayed gratification thing, right? Like having some restraint and having some wherewithal to be like, wow, I'm noticing that I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. Let me stay in this. Let me explore this. Let me kind of unpack, then just instantly I'm uncomfortable running. I don't like to have this feeling. I don't recall like the baby boomer generation anyway. Like, I don't even think that was in their vocabulary, this uncomfortable thing, right? Like they were so much more entirely uncomfortable all the time in so many aspects, right? And
I'm the last year, actually 63, 64 is the last year of the baby boom. So yeah, I'm part of the baby boom generation. Wow, I love the way you brought that up. That's so true. I've been having, I really do feel like there's a lot of people not wanting to be uncomfortable, and it's an offense if they get uncomfortable around you've offended them,
right?
Or even these trigger warnings before things, saying, just a trigger warning in case you don't want to feel disturbed, we're going to be discussing this or that. I feel like we might be getting less resilient, and that there is something valuable in being uncomfortable, because you know that it's going to be better if you get through the discomfort, just like I did with swimming.
Right.
Felt great afterwards.
It's almost like we are inspiring fragility, in people by being like, oh yes, definitely don't be uncomfortable. That would be terrible. Right. And then we are creating more fragile humans, in my opinion. Anyway. Okay. Wow.
Thank you, Dotsie, because really, it's thanks for talking it over with me. I feel better about going swimming on that cold day.
Good.
And I'll continue to do it. So let's introduce our guest today, because she's going to talk about something I think a lot of us will really learn so much from her about, and be better consumers and citizens of the world after we've listened to her.
Yes, let's dive into Kim Paschen.
If you've ever purchased a cruelty-free product, you have seen the Leaping Bunny logo. This simple cartoon rabbit is the undisputed stamp of cruelty-free approval. So when you buy a cosmetic or a house cleaner with a bunny, you know it's never been tested on animals, period. And today we're chatting with the program manager behind Leaping Bunny, Kim Paschen. She's been with the company for over a decade, and she is dedicated to upholding the standard for cruelty-free cosmetics and cleaners. She's here to give us insights on the future of cruelty-free and to offer a perspective on how far the concept of cruelty-free has come. So welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Dottie and I do love that your name, Kim Paschen, sounds so much like compassion, because that really is what your job is all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about connecting compassionate consumers with cruelty-free companies.
So Leaping Bunny, I know a lot of people have seen that logo. Tell us how it was formed. Why was there a need for it?
Absolutely. So back in the mid 90s, the jargon cruelty-free, the claim cruelty-free became quite a buzzword, and it was used a lot on packaging so that people could, feel good about what they were purchasing. The term cruelty-free actually doesn't have any significance in a legal realm. That is, there is no legislation in place that makes companies substantiate the claim for cruelty free, much like you would have for, say, USDA organic. And so companies were able to make this claim cruelty free or not tested on animals without having to actually prove that no animal testing was occurring. So, in light of all of this greenwashing, there were a bunch of animal protection organizations that got together and decided they would develop a standard. And this standard would be used to essentially qualify companies for entrance into the Leaping Bunny program. And the standard would be applied uniformly across all of the companies applying. And thus the Leaping Bunny program in 1996 was formed. And we started out with just a handful of companies, really, and we now have over 2,000 certified brands.
So Kim, you mentioned about standards. Can you explain to us the criteria that a beauty product or a cleaner has to have to be able to get your logo?
Sure, absolutely. There are a few main parts to our standard. The first one is that the company that's applying must fill out an application for approval and submit a lot of information about the business practices of the company. But more importantly, they must establish a cruelty-free supplier monitoring system. And what this means is that every single raw material supplier or manufacturer must complete individually a declaration signed that says that the company that's applying for certification does not test on animals. And so what you have at the end is not just the company that's applying for certification, the brand that you or I know, but also all of their suppliers and manufacturers are individually agreeing not to animal test. And so that is, the very basis of a company's certification. Additionally, companies must annually recommit to our program. And we do this because we realize that suppliers and manufacturers can change throughout the year. And we want to make sure that our company's records are as up to date as possible. And so every company must undergo this recommitment process annually in order to stay on our list. And as a result, we really have a very updated, clean list at all times because, companies, there's no information there that gets too stagnant. The third qualification to be Leaping Bunny certified is agreeing to be open to an independent audit. We have an auditor that we hire who goes and before COVID actually physically went to the company's headquarters to conduct the audit. We are now doing audits through Zoom, but he makes sure that the company's supplier monitoring system is working correctly, that all of the suppliers and manufacturers that are listed in our system are the ones that the company is actually using. And he's just doing an overall check to make sure that other business practices are also in alignment with the Leaping Bunny program. So those are the three main tenets of the Leaping Bunny program and how we assess whether or not a company is cruelty-free or not.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for, wow, it's very, very complicated and complex. especially those audits, I would imagine. So I don't know. Again, just thank you for this incredible work that you guys do at Leaping Bunny. I think there's so many kind of convoluted areas in this space, and I read that you said that most animal testing is really done at the ingredient level. That the ingredient may not be purposely for that specific cosmetic, but it maybe was tested for a different product. So that's just one way really in which cruelty-free can become so convoluted. So the blush itself or the mascara itself may not have been rubbed in the bunny's eye to see what happens, but the ingredient in it could have.
Yeah, that's right, Dotsy. At this point, really, by and large, the majority of the testing is done at the ingredient level. And a lot of times it's not even done by the company that's selling the finished product. It's being conducted or commissioned by a third party. And so that's another qualification when companies are signing up and when suppliers and manufacturers are signing our forms, they must agree that no third-party testing is occurring, because obviously there can be information lost down the pipeline, and we want to make sure that everyone is as aware as possible about what's going into that supply chain management.
Yeah.
When everything has to be tested for safety with cosmetics anyway, can you with certainty say that we have alternatives to animals that provide the exact same safety, if not more safety? Because as Dotsy and I certainly know, Kim, and I'm sure you know too, animals are not the best models for human beings. Human beings and their own cells are. Could you talk a little bit about the testing, talk about the testing and the non-animal tests that we've now developed so that we don't need animals?
Absolutely. So some of the most common tests are the Dre's eye test. I think that's the one that's most notorious, because that's certainly one that's, there have been pictures all over different mediums of the press that show bunnies with eyes that are red and watery. And that's really a test where a rabbit most often is restrained and a substance is dripped into its eye, and it's evaluated over the course of anywhere from a day to up to 14 days, and it's not allowed to, rub that substance out of its eye. And that test is obviously inhumane for many reasons, but it's also a test that doesn't really give us accurate results, because rabbits' eyes are much more sensitive than humans' eyes. So you're really comparing apples to oranges. And that's what's happening with a lot of animal tests. We're doing them because it's what we've done in the past, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more accurate, that they're cheaper, that they're faster than a non-animal alternative. So we certainly, the Dre's is one. We also have repeated dose toxicity tests, and in that case a lot of times mice are used. And it's really important to state that we don't actually know how many animals each year are being used in these tests, because birds, rats, and mice are not covered under the Animal Welfare Act. And because of that, their numbers are not required to be reported to any regulatory or federal authority. And so it's absolutely impossible to estimate accurately the number of animals that are used. But by and large, rabbits, mice, and rats and guinea pigs to a lesser extent are used. There's also a skin corrosion test that is used. And often that is done on rabbits. And that's pretty much what you could imagine it to be. The skin is abraded with something, and a substance is put on the skin to measure the reaction. Again, skin is different from mammal to mammal, so it's really difficult to extrapolate those test results and put them on, a human. So we have a lot of have a lot of animal testing still going on, but we also have a really promising amount of non-animal tests that are in development and that are frankly accepted all over the world. We have human skin cultures where cells from actual humans are grown and cultured, and then substances can be applied to those to see what the reaction is, and that's really the ideal environment, right? We also have what seems to be the most exciting development is what is called organ on a chip. And that is where literally a microchip is redesigned so that it replicates a human body's system, like the circulatory system or the respiratory system or the digestive system. And a substance can be applied to that and outcomes can then be measured. And all of that is done on a chip. So you can imagine that that is obviously the developing of that is very costly, but that certainly is in the long run not as expensive as having to breed animals, house them, care for them, maybe see them through several generations for some tox testing. So in the long run, it's definitely more viable.
Yeah. I know that you are keeping an eye on mainland China, which is home to over 1 billion people, because right now animal testing is required in China. I've read that you're hoping that will be lifted soon, so I want to talk about that. But if a company sells in mainland China, like Mac, for example, which didn't test on animals here in the United States and used to be a cruelty-free product. But if a company sells in mainland China, it cannot be Leaping Bunny certified. Is that correct?
So at this time, we're actually looking very closely at new regulation that came out and was actually made legal on the 1st of May of this year. The CSAR, or some people call it CSAR, is the regulations for cosmetics in China. And that was overhauled and finally implemented on the 1st of May. And one of the items of the CSAR, which is a very, very extensive set of regulations, is that non-special use or general use or ordinary cosmetics can now, going forward, be imported into China and skip the animal testing requirement if they meet a certain set of criteria.
And are those criteria something that they would meet? For example, Benefit was a company that I used because they didn't test on animals, and then they started selling in China, like so many companies want, because it's such a huge, as Dotsie mentioned, such a huge market. Would Benefit be able to just say, oh, well, we passed these tests that the United States required, and so we're good. We can now sell with you. What kind of things is China asking for that might be barriers to these companies that want to be cruelty free because they sell to people like Dotsie and me?
Well, that's a great question, Alexandra, because right now we're actually going through exactly that challenge of what the barriers are. And the major barrier right now for companies in the US that want to sell in China is that they need to provide a certificate of good manufacturing processes. And currently, that is not something any governmental agency is issuing. And this is true for countries all over the world, but we've been watching very closely, and over the last couple of weeks, many countries like the UK and France have actually quickly worked to develop a certificate of GMP that could be used to sell in China. And so we're monitoring the situation in the US, but right now that is definitely a trade barrier in that US companies have no way of getting that certificate of GMP, which is one of the major pieces of documentation needed to avoid the animal testing requirement for imported cosmetics.
China originally said every cosmetic or household cleaner that comes into China has to be tested on animals. And then tell me if I'm wrong, Kim, then they seem to have ameliorated that a little bit to, if you're manufactured here in China, then you don't have to pass you don't have to have animal tests. And now they're making it even better for animals. Why are they doing this?
Well, I think there's a couple of different reasons. I think that the Chinese people are demanding it. With all of these brands coming into China, they have more choices and consumers have more power to decide what brands they want to support. So on the one hand, there's that, but on the other hand, it's, there's pressure from companies, and companies want to sell in China. They recognize the opportunity for growth there, and they are, pressuring governmental officials to accept alternatives and accept the way that other countries handle it. And then as a side note, we've also seen Chinese researchers start to embrace alternatives. And so that wasn't necessarily something that was a given in the culture. And all of these institutions, all of these testing facilities need to learn. They need to have the actual equipment to do the alternative testing. And so different organizations in the US and frankly all over the world have been working with Chinese authorities to get them to adopt these non-animal methods of testing.
Okay. Cosmetic companies are very similar to food companies, where they just love to slap a ton of labels on their product, partly to maybe confuse, and then certainly to entice consumers to completely trust them. So what is the difference between, I'll see, clean, something about green, eco-friendly is popular, cruelty-free, vegan? I've learned if it's vegan, it's not necessarily cruelty-free, which was like a horrible thing to learn.
Oh, tell me that. I didn't know that. Can you explain that?
Sure. So
sorry, Dotsie, I interrupted you.
No, she can explain it better than I can, but yeah.
So a lot of people confuse the terms cruelty-free and vegan. Cruelty-free has generally come to be understood as something that is not tested on animals for either safety, efficacy, environmental, whatever reason. Vegan, on the other hand, signifies that a product is free of any animal ingredients. And so while we do have many companies that are both free of animal testing and vegan, we do not certify for vegan. That's a huge undertaking, and it's not something that's in our wheelhouse. That would involve going through individual formulations and making sure that ingredients weren't swapped out. An example that always comes to mind for me is glycerin. And glycerin can be either animal derived or vegetable derived, or plant derived rather. And that might not be differentiated in the ingredient list. A company might not know which one it is. And so there are third-party vegan certifiers out there that are equipped to handle that sort of burden. And we really just focus then on cruelty-free claims.
Do you think we can trust products if they say that they're vegan? Might they not be?
The good news with vegan with vegan claims is that there is a law that requires companies to publish ingredient lists on their packaging.
Yeah.
And so a consumer can look to see if there are animal ingredients or byproducts in any particular product. And obviously, if there's a concern, contact the company. But since cruelty-free has no defined meaning by law, a company could put cruelty-free on their packaging or in their marketing materials and not have to back that up. There's nothing to really show for it. And so that's why a third-party certification comes in handy.
Wow. Thank you, Dati. Thanks for asking that question because I just learned a lot about that. Kim, thanks.
Sure.
So there are countries that are the opposite of China who have actually banned cosmetics and cleaning products that have been tested on animals and their ingredients have been tested on animals. Can you talk about those countries? Tell us which countries they are and what it actually means. Because just like Dotsie noted a loophole in some of the labeling, maybe there's also loopholes in what these countries are allowing in.
Sure. So I can tell you that the EU, Israel, Norway, India, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia have banned animal testing. There are definitely loopholes, though. One of the biggest threats that we're seeing is right now in the EU with this piece of legislation called REACH. And REACH is a piece of legislation that has been designed to protect worker safety on all kinds of ingredients. And it was never intended to be applied towards cosmetics, ingredients that were only used in cosmetics. But we are seeing some instances where ingredients solely used in cosmetics are now being tested on for worker safety, environmental safety under this piece of legislation. And so when you have these pieces of legislation like REACH that really supersede any sort of cosmetics directive in the name of safety, that definitely represents a giant loophole.
So does that mean that there are, what I think I hear you're saying is that in the EU there are cosmetics and household cleaning products that are actually not cruelty-free, even though consumers think that those countries don't allow them in or don't allow them to be manufactured in the country?
It definitely is a possibility. And that's why we're obviously so happy to see all of these countries. And now we're even getting to some states where California, Nevada, Illinois are states that have passed animal testing or cosmetics testing bans. We're really happy to see this progress. But frankly, the Leaping Bunny standard is higher because it doesn't allow for animal testing to occur. And so, brands that are Leaping Bunny certified have additional requirements in order to get that certification.
Okay. I don't, gosh, I don't think I know nearly as much about the animal testing process as Alexander does, or definitely you do. How many, what are some of the rules and the parameters? Like how many tests need to be done on how many animals to get it certified? And is it different for different types of cosmetics for it allowed to be sold? And we talked about dropping drops or putting something in the bunny's eye. I think that possibly might be the only one that I am aware of, and many of our listeners. So let's go down the rabbit hole, if you will, on what is this animal testing process? What does it look like for the animals?
Well, it depends on the ingredient in question. There are obviously thousands upon thousands of ingredients that have already been deemed safe. So, the testing a lot of times now is happening with newer ingredients. It's also happening to assess interactions with other ingredients. And, it really depends on the ingredient in question, what tests are done.
Right.
Some require, a phototoxicity test. Some require a reproductive toxicity test. So there are numerous charts and tables, and it's easily researchable to see exactly what kinds of tests are required for specific ingredients. But in terms of establishing protocols, that is not something that we're involved in. And to be frank with you, am not exactly sure who's establishing that, because the Consumer Product Safety Commission in the US, they do not require animal testing to assess the safety or efficacy of a product or ingredient. They leave it up to manufacturers themselves to do that. And so some of those tests would be animal tests, perhaps, others might not be, but it really comes down to companies policing themselves. And the only case where a regulatory body would step in is if there's some sort of product recall, or there's been, a widespread report of detrimental effects for the use of a product.
So what I'm hearing is that, because you didn't list the United States in that list of countries that don't allow animal testing on certain products, although you did say states. So I thought that it fell under the Federal Drug and Cosmetic Act that mandates animal testing. But what I'm hearing from you is that actually states can make the rules about what, for anything that goes in the eye, we need to do the Drey's test or the alternative to the Drey's test. Is that, am I understanding you correctly?
It actually comes down to, the manufacturers themselves. And since there's no federal legislation which directs this, right now, all of these individual bills that have been passed have been done at the state. There is a cosmetics testing ban that was previously introduced in Congress a couple of times. The bill didn't go anywhere. The hope is that enough states get on board that there would be a tipping point where the states that hadn't adopted a ban would, it would follow that the testing ban would eventually be ratified at a federal level.
I just want to go back to the animal testing process for a second, because I don't feel like I got any idea of what actually happens to the animals, because we're talking this whole hour about stopping animal testing, and at face value it's like, oh yes, that sounds terrible, but what do they do to them besides put stuff in their eyes? Like, why is this so critical? I mean, I'm sure you're very impassioned about it because you wouldn't do this work otherwise. What are we fighting to stop? What do they do to them?
Well, animals are generally, especially mice, they're bred specifically for research purposes. And aside from for cosmetics testing purposes, where substances are dripped in the eye or on the skin, animals are forced to ingest toxic, a substance at a toxic level. It's called the LD50 test. It's not used as much anymore, but it's basically a measurement of when half of the population of a set of animals dies from ingesting a certain substance. And so, there's a lot of pressure to obviously do away with that, because the animals themselves go through horrendous suffering with pain, seizures, vomiting. They obviously can't talk to us, so we don't know exactly what they're feeling, but it certainly is nothing good. And for most animals, at the end of an experiment, they're euthanized.
Yeah.
So even if the animal is not, put through a treatment that results in its immediate death, then it's euthanized at the end of the experiment. And sometimes especially with reproductive toxicity tests, it's not even about the first generation animal like the mama mouse. It would be about, her babies, for example. And as you can imagine, that takes a long time to get to that level, because you've got to actually create these future generations of mice. But if you're looking for tumor development or other types of cancers, then you need to maybe look further down the line.
Yeah. What would a lab learn from the toxicity being so high that they know it's going to kill them? Like, they're not going to put that toxicity as high for humans. Why don't they go really low to see, what the barrier is, what the level is that they would need to use or not use?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of the reasons that the LD50 is being phased out.
It's a way to measure. It's just a way to give a top end, I think. Lethal dose 50 is what it stands for. And but you're right, Dotsie. You're pointing out the sort of unnecessary cruelty of these tests. Kim, when Dotsie was asking about the situation with the animals, we can tell that there are a lot of animals used for just, let's say, one mascara. Because of the reproduction toxicity tests that need to be done, and the different levels of skin allergy, and the different, not only, Dotsie, do you have to put maybe a drop, but then you have to test it with 2 drops and then 3 drops. So there's many different levels within a test, I would imagine, Kim, that you have to do. Who does these tests? Tell us about CROs if you have any awareness of them, because it's not Revlon who does the test themselves. They hire people and companies to breed these animals and do the tests, right?
Yeah, I would say by and large, the testing is done by independent labs, but certainly the bigger companies may have their own in-house testing facilities. It's hard to say exactly what the procedure is, but I would imagine most of the testing is done on a contractual basis with an outside third party.
It sounds like there's no universal standard that cosmetics have to go through from country to country. So, Kim, if a company like, well, a company that makes mascara is allowed to sell it in the United States, do they then have to test it differently for Brazil and for Chile and for France, et cetera? Do each of these countries have some kind of standards? I would imagine the United States doesn't let just any old mascara come from any country outside of the United States.
Are you talking about products that are coming into the US or products that are going out of the US into other countries?
I was talking about both, but I'm glad you separated it. So yeah, if you can talk to both of those, that'd be great.
So right now, the only country that absolutely requires animal testing for imported cosmetics up until, the 1st of May across the board was China. And so there have been some reports of Russia and Brazil also requiring tests, but nothing that is, it's nothing on the scale of China. And it certainly doesn't represent the amount of consumers that would be buying the products from the US. So to answer your question about products going into another country, yes, they would have to undergo any sort of tests, whether or not they be animal tests, if a country required them. And so that's also why the EU cosmetics ban has loopholes, because if a company wanted to sell its products into China, for example, and not a Leaping Bunny certified company, but just a regular company, they would have to undergo animal tests, and that would be excluded from that ban in the language. So, there isn't one worldwide standard for measuring the safety or efficacy of an ingredient or a finished product. It's really done on a country by country basis. As for products coming into the US, I actually am not too familiar with that. Our government doesn't have a law like China's that requires countries or companies to undergo a battery of tests to be allowed to sell in the US. I think that if there is an adverse effect that is occurring, they would have to perhaps do a product recall, run additional tests, maybe stop selling. But that would be on a case-by-case basis at this point.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious as to where you see animal testing on cosmetics going. Like maybe there's a hope that you guys will be out of business one day, right? Because just nobody even thinks that is a viable way for cosmetics to be tested on animals. And then you can get back to your master's in French linguistics or all the other amazing things that you have done and studied prior to this career. Where are we going? What's the future? What are you seeing?
So it's a very interesting present and future, because I don't think any of us thought that we would still be doing this now in 2021 when the program was started in 1996. We've made so much progress, and with the development of eco-friendly beauty, indie beauty, with the proliferation of influencers selling products, the internet, social media, we've seen so many companies grow and so many new startups, and all of these companies that are doing the right thing to start out with by not animal testing. And so we're really pleased to see all of this progress on the one hand. On the other hand, we see these threats like REACH, these threats that could actually almost reverse all of the progress that has been made to end animal testing. And that is something that is certainly very scary, because we think we're making so much progress, and the consumers that are just a consumer that is not super well informed, and frankly most consumers are basic consumers. I know I would be if I weren't working on this program. Mm-hmm. They just want to pick up the product and see cruelty-free. They don't understand all the nuances that are associated, that cruelty-free means nothing, that it could be tested on for a regulatory requirement, that an ingredient is tested on by a third party. If someone posts, or if a label says not tested on animals, maybe that just means that the company, the brand itself didn't test, but what about a third party? And so there's really a slippery slope with trying to understand all this information. And I don't see that going away anytime soon, unfortunately. I really think that logos like the Leaping Bunny logo are actually more important than ever now, because of this proliferation of misinformation.
Yeah.
You have an app, don't you, that will help consumers be able to tell when they're actually shopping whether a product is certified? Can you tell our audience about that so they can go download it as soon as this show's over?
Sure. So our app is called Cruelty Free, and it's free. It's on the Android and the iPhone platforms, and it lists companies by product type and also by brand name. It allows consumers to scan UPC codes on the backs of products to see if that company is Leaping Bunny certified. And it also allows shoppers to create their, a shopping list of favorite companies. The new version, which we hope will be out by the summer, will actually be like a live feed from our website, which is updated literally by my colleagues, my super hardworking colleagues who are doing all of the approvals and recommitments. They are updating our website probably as we speak right now. And we really want the app to reflect that, because that's, I think, what people are using the most when they go there. They have their phone out when they're shopping. They're not necessarily looking on a computer. And so even though our desktop version, or I guess our website version rather, is always up to date, we want to make sure that it's delivered in a very user-friendly format to shoppers when they're on the go.
When I remember when I was younger, it was Paul Mitchell who first started boasting about the fact that they were cruelty free, and otherwise companies were not shouting to the rooftops. It was not a selling point.
Right.
Kim, is it a selling point now? And our companies, because the young companies, the hip companies, they all seem to go, oh no, we don't test on animals. When I ask them, it seems like it's sort of very outdated to actually test on animals, and it's not cool.
And I would see these companies, and so many of them had our logo on their booth, on signage, and they were just so proud to display that and show their commitment to no animal testing. And so, I think companies are, a lot of them might not realize the significance of the logo and of the certification if they're not certified, but once they get in the know, they realize how much it speaks for itself. And, I should add really that to become Leaping Bunny certified, it's actually free for a company. So we do not charge. A lot of people think that it costs a lot of money, but to be listed on our website and in our app, it's completely free of charge. We function as a nonprofit. The only cost is if a company optionally decides to license the logo. And that's a very, very minimal charge, one-time fee, and it's based on a sliding scale. So it obviously, it is, we recognize there are startups that can't pay what, huge corporations can pay. And so that fee goes right back into the program, and it helps to pay for our independent auditor who goes out and does about 25 audits of individual companies each year. So, I think that companies are really proud to have it. They're proud to be associated with us. We do a ton of promotions on social media through both Instagram and Facebook, and we, unlike other influencers, do not charge companies at all for posting. So they're also really excited to get involved in that aspect of the program.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've noticed in the last probably about 3 years how much easier it is to get the people who work at places like Sephora and Ulta to point out the cruelty-free products. I mean, just the fact that they know what I'm talking about says you guys are doing an incredible job, because that wasn't the case before. But they're really leaning into taking some pride in being able to point those products out. So let's talk about some of those products. What are your faves? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we are so lucky that we get to try so many amazing products. It's really just one of the best parts of my job. I didn't realize how into skin serums I really am.
Yeah.
So I put like 5 on my face like every morning and night, and they're different.
And your skin looks amazing.
It does. Working.
Thank you. I've been really loving Juice Beauty right now. They have an amazing anti-aging moisturizer, and I use that absolutely either every morning or every evening. So That's one for sure. I have also been using this coloring product called Aura, and it's from eSalon. And I don't know if you can see in the podcast, but my hair is tinged blue and purple.
Yeah.
And so I've been using that, and it's an amazing experience because you can actually go out to their website and create your own custom color and even name it, so that when you get your products, it has like the name that you gave it and the scent that you've chosen. And then I think one of my all-time absolute faves, it's super basic, but it literally has stood the test of time for me over 12 years, it's called Buddha Organics. And it is a women-owned business, all vegan, and they make this product called Buddha butter. And it's in this beautiful golden tin, and you can just the uses are incredible. Moisturizing for nails, for babies, for hair, for lips, you name it. And it smells like this delicious chocolatey coconut. And I've had a lot of products come across my counter in the last 12 years, but that is one that I continually go back to.
Oh, cool. I've seen it actually at my co-op, my health food store in Santa Monica.
You
So I'm going to go get some. Yes.
Buddha
I liked
butter.
it because it's in a tin. It's not plastic. That's how I noticed it.
They're incredible. And they even have lip balms that are in the eco-friendly paper tubes now that are recyclable.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for a great service that you and Leaping Bunny are doing for all of us who want to be better, more conscious consumers, but don't have the tools.
Yeah.
And now we do.
We do. We have
Thank
face
you.
serums and Juice Beauty, and we've got hair color now. And we've got butter for our bodies. Like, it's just, I'm headed out. I'm going to get
I
all
know.
three. Wow.
It's amazing.
Super
Thank you
cool.
so much for being
You're
on the
welcome.
show,
Thank
Kim.
you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was awesome. Hey,
Thank you.
folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.